Welcome to Leadership Mindset 2.0. I'm R. Michael Anderson. Usually, I'm the one asking the questions or doing the coaching. But recently, the script was flipped. I was interviewed by Hugo Dahlbom for the Executive Network's President's Institute in the Nordics, and the conversation went so deep into the transition from doer to leader that I wanted to share it here with you. In part one of this interview, we break down why authentic leadership doesn't mean oversharing, using a pilot in the cockpit analogy, and how to finally break the addiction to doing your team's work for them. A quick production note. Hugo specifically asked us to use an AI voice to replace his own to ensure the best possible audio clarity for you. He has a bit of a Swedish accent. So the questions are his, but the voice is digital. Let's get to work.
Welcome to Leadership Mindset 2.0. Practical neuroscience and psychology to transform you from a tactical doer into a strategic leader. Here is your host, former social entrepreneur of the year and coach to some of the world's top executives, R. Michael Anderson.
My name is Hugo, and I represent the Executive Network President's Institute. We stem from the Nordics, situated in Copenhagen, but we work throughout, and essentially what we do is we put together executive leaders in our organization and we let them spar through peer-to-peer learning to develop their leadership skills. Okay, Michael, first and foremost, I'm very thankful for having this conversation and having you here. I'm super interested in your thoughts and your thoughts on leadership. I read your book. So first I want to talk about is going from a doer to a strategic leader. You noted that when people move into leadership, they often must release and reset what worked for them before as successful doers. What exactly holds managers back, and how can they overcome that and be more successful?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because I run into it. It seems like every day I'm having conversations about exactly this. And what gets us promoted is often a real sense of taking ownership of things and really getting them done, doing them. And I talk about, when I was a doer, I was really good about outworking one specific problem, maybe working with one or two clients. I was a bit introverted. I would be like a dog. I would bite into a problem and not stop until it was done. However, when we get into leadership, we have so many different duties. We have to oversee a team. And when we go in with that mindset of, I'm going to take ownership of everything, it ends up taking things away from the team. And so when it comes to how we've been programmed, more or less, and we've been doing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and not only have we been doing, but we've been getting pats on the proverbial back. Like, hey, Mike, you've been doing really good. You're really good at getting into the details and taking ownership. We're conditioned to do that. And then when we get into leadership and we're leading a team, and then there's a problem, we want to jump in right away, because that is what we've trained our mind to do. And what we need to do is we need to break that thought pattern and that programming. And when, for example, a problem happens, we have to move into like a coach, or we have to move into a mentor and have our team take over and do it while we have oversight of them. So, because if we try, and leaders that try to jump in and work with that doer programming just find themselves overwhelmed and exhausted all the time.
Okay, that's interesting. And when you talk about jumping into the role of being a mentor or a coach, can you explain a bit further on that?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's a great question, because a lot of people don't get this. Because I get leaders, and what they do is they will have something and they'll give it to an employee, or they'll have one of the members of their team handle a certain area of their duties, maybe marketing or finance or this region or whatever. And as long as they don't hear any information back, they think things are going well. However, as a leader, we need to basically keep an eye on things. So they may be having issues, but they don't want to come to you because you're the leader and it'll look bad on them. So first thing is we need visibility into everything. So that means as a leader, we need to be in there knowing what's happening. Not spending all the time in there, not micromanaging, but checking in with them and asking really good questions to do that. 2, we need to constantly be developing them. Everybody on your team has blind spots and they all have development opportunities. So as a leader, what you want to do is you want to work out with them what their development opportunities are, and then with their everyday duties, with the clients they're working with, the processes that they run, with the people maybe on their team or they have to deal with. You want to help them out with how they need to grow with as far as communication, as far as personality, as far as accountability, because they all have stuff to learn. And you are in a unique position because you as the leader sit up above them and you know what's going on in the different departments. You know what the goal of the whole team is. So you need to be coaching them there. The third thing is if they don't know how to do something, it's okay to challenge them to do it. And so instead of just doing it for them or dropping it on their plate, there's an opportunity for you to get them involved doing it and doing a lot of the work along with your expertise. Then they're going to be better at doing it the next time, the next time, and the next time. And you're taking something off of your plate where you're growing a leader within your team.
Okay, that's very interesting. And when we talk about blind spots of employees or people within my team, how would you go about on finding these blind spots?
So the way you find blind spots is you need to observe and be connected to the leader or the person on your team. And what that might be is I say leaders have to audit a lot. And so if I have somebody on my team and they are responsible for a specific process, I might walk through step by step of where they're out on a process or a customer or a project. And 95% of the time, if I just ask more detailed questions, I'm going to find things that they could be doing better. This often is not because of a lack of effort or a lack of skill. The fact is you can't read the label of a jar when you're inside the jar. When you're busy doing all these different duties, you often get stuck in the details. And when somebody is there just to ask curious questions, well, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing it that way? You can find things that can be done better. Why don't you talk to this person? Does this still need to be done this way? These are all great questions that when you ask people that, you can help coach them in a way that's going to make them more effective. And then what happens is when you move into this coaching role and you observe them, you observe the person in meetings, you see maybe if they're running a team, where the issues in their team are, the consistent problems are their blind spots. So if they are having a problem with maybe very analytical people or engineers here and here and here, you know that their blind spot maybe is working with really analytical people. So you need to help coach them on how to properly do that.
Okay, I want to move a bit further within growth leadership, but also talk about authenticity. Why do you see personal growth, authenticity, and even vulnerability as essential traits for experienced executives? And how can leaders demonstrate these qualities without undermining their authority?
And we've all heard of authenticity and vulnerability in leadership. And the funny thing is what I say is don't ever tell a leader to be more vulnerable or to be more authentic. And the reason is if you tell somebody that's insecure and maybe struggling with self-doubt to be more authentic or to be more vulnerable, it's going to probably backfire. Because authenticity, there's a healthy authenticity and an unhealthy authenticity, and same with vulnerability. And so what you don't want to do as a leader is just throw up all of your problems onto your team. That doesn't work well. I give an example. Say you're flying in a plane, you're a passenger in a plane, and all of a sudden the cockpit door opens and the pilot comes out and the pilot's like, oh my gosh, we have a problem with the engine and I don't know how to fix it. Was the pilot authentic? Yes. Was the pilot vulnerable? Yes. Is that probably a good place for the pilot to be authentic and vulnerable? Probably not. So as a leader, we need to really understand authenticity and vulnerability. And it really comes from understanding who we are and being okay with who we are. And that might be we don't know something, and it's okay not to know something, but as a leader, sometimes we don't want to admit that. But when you can stay in your power and really own up to the places where you're not perfect, where you have a gap in knowledge, where maybe you made a mistake, that really shows your team a lot. That shows your team you have massive honesty. That shows your team it's okay not to know everything. It shows your team potentially that it's okay to take risks and not be perfect all the time. Because a lot of leaders, what they want is they want their team to take initiative. They want their team to be creative. The thing is, if you take initiative and be creative and take risks, you have to be okay with not being perfect and not having things be 100% all the time. So the way you model that is with authenticity and vulnerability. But again, it's from a powerful place. It's like, hey, look, I don't understand this, but I'm still the leader. I still got everything covered. Hey, I'm not perfect at this, or I screwed that up, and that's okay. We still got everything covered. So that's what I mean by authenticity really creates connection with your team because they see you as a human, and then you'll have more loyalty and connection and better culture with your team. But you do that by working on yourself, and you do that by gaining more knowledge of who you are and becoming a more secure person.
Okay, and one thing I picked up on there, which I think is very interesting, is risk. And you talked about risk, like taking risk. If you take risk, you have to be okay when getting things wrong. Can you put a few more words on that?
Yes, absolutely. When you have leaders that are very top down and don't show any authenticity and vulnerability, you create disconnection with the leader. And then you also create, whether you want to or not, this culture of perfection. And you might want a culture of perfection if you're, for example, in a bank or a financial institution. But the problem is, if you have a culture of perfection, you don't have a culture of risk. You don't have a culture of taking initiatives. So you have to understand, you have to know the balance of what you want in your organization. So most leaders I know, they want everybody to take more ownership and to take more risks. And you also can educate. So if you're in this position, you also can educate your team members on taking risks. Taking risks might not be putting $1 million, for example, at risk. Maybe what you can do is you can break things down into small risks. Sometimes I call these experiments, because when you call them experiments, you're actually seeing if something will work or won't work. Maybe you have a new idea of a project or of a product, of a customer segment. And the thing is, most companies, especially nowadays, you want to try new things. So when you can break things down into experiments, you have less at risk. It makes it a little bit fun. People think out of the box, but then you also contain it because we don't have limited resources. We don't have limited time. So if you do want to take risks, have a conversation about it. How can we get a taste of if something will work or not work? And let's put some time boundaries around it. Let's talk about what success is and what success isn't. Like, are we going to go forward or not go forward? And really put a wrapper around it. And that's a really good way to go in managing risk in a team. Here's your challenge for the week based on what we just discussed. Stop asking your team to take risks. See, with a risk, you can either succeed or fail. Start challenging your team to take experiments. Because the thing is, when you take an experiment, there is no winning or losing. You succeed just by conducting the experiment. When you take an experiment, remember, boil it down to the smallest task, the smallest investment in time, money, resources that you can get a gauge on whether it's going to work or not. This takes all the fear, this takes all the risk, this takes all the anxiety out of going forward with it. And it really turns it into a learning process. So over these next few days, look at your life and what your team's doing. What experiments can you take? What experiments can your team take on? Be sure to tune in next week for part 2, where we go even deeper, where we get into the real psychology of things. We talk about the curse of experience, why older, more experienced leaders stop taking risks, and I break down the ARC model for handling high-stake crises. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the conclusion. I'm R. Michael Anderson. I'll see you next week.